What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Thomas, bringing you another edition of the Thomas Take. A beautiful day in Western New York today. It is May 15th, I think we're looking at. May 15th. Yes, it is Monday, May 15th. Damn, this month is going by fast. What a time it is to be alive in Western New York. Weather is starting to appear as if it is getting better, but things look to be getting better at One Bills Drive as the Buffalo Bills have hired Brian Beane and Joe Schoen. Schoen, as the assistant GM, and Brian Beane, the vice president of pro player personnel. So this regime looks to be a far cry from those of years past. What a change it has been in the last, let's just say, few months, when 3-4 months ago, the Bills had sent out Anthony Lynn for a press conference about the Rex Ryan decision, about the starting quarterback decision. And Doug Whaley made the famous press conference that he was not privy to the conversation of Rex's firing. Dysfunction abounded at One Bills Drive, leaking out of the organization of what their next move would be to the media. And now the national media has quite a lot to say about this hire, about the Brandon Beane hire, about the Sean McDermott hire, about the Brian Beane hire and the Joe Schoen hire. Bills front office looks to be in impeccable shape in comparison to the decades of years past, I could say, since the start of the drought. Back when we went to those 4 Super Bowls, we had a team that was in unison. We had a GM that was a, cutting edge, cunning mind, guy that was willing to analyze the X's and O's of the game, but take to heart the critical thinking that the game offered in Bill Polian. You had John Butler and waiting in the wings as the assistant GM. You had A.J. Smith, who was a top scout in the NFL. That threesome, those 3 guys were responsible for helping the Bills become one of the most dominant franchises in any decade, going to 4 straight Super Bowls, being a part of the playoffs year in and year out throughout the 90s. And I think that we have that. We are trying to get that back with Brandon Beane, Brian Beane, and Joe Schoen. I think the Bills are really trying to reinvent themselves in a positive way. I'm very excited about both Beane and Schoen coming in and being hired by the Bills. Beane was a guy that I really was interested in terms of the general manager's position, and he was interviewed by the Buffalo Bills. He's got a real great track record at finding defensive studs on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's early in a draft or late in a draft or outside of the draft. He's been able to bring in some top-flight players for those Houston Texans defenses, namely Jadeveon Clowney, J.J. Watt, over the course of his time with the Texans, Brian Cushing, guys like that. He was instrumental in bringing those guys into the Houston Texans. Obviously, Clowney was the first overall pick. Some suggest that maybe they should have went with Khalil Mack first overall, but at the time, Clowney was the consensus number 1 guy, and Houston did not blink. Obviously, we know what J.J. Watt has done in this league, and then you look at hiring a guy from a division rival in Joe Schoen from the Miami Dolphins. The message is heard loud and clear from Terry Pegula that the naysayers need to stay quiet. Haters are going to hate, do what they do, as much as they want to say that there is some slight dysfunction at One Bills Drive. Terry is not having it, and he's bringing in experienced executives to run this show from top to bottom with precision. I don't think the 2017 season for the Buffalo Bills will be one of promise, but I think within the next few years to come, we will start to see the fortunes change of this franchise much quicker than I had anticipated originally. I thought that this would be a real bad rebuilding process for the Bills. not knowing which direction they would go in. My expectations were very low for the Buffalo Bills in terms of their rebuilding process, being that they fired Rex Ryan, being that they fired Doug Whaley. I thought, here we go again. And I like the Sean McDermott hire. I like the Brandon Beane hire. I like the Brian Gain and Joe Shane hire. And from what I'm hearing, Trey Brown, another general manager candidate for the Buffalo Bills, could be on his way to One Bills Drive in a scouting role. So the Bills are really looking to add big names to their front office, names that are widely respected around the national media and around the NFL. Very excited. Josh Norman of the Carolina Panthers tweeted that the Bills got a smart guy in Brandon Beane, a guy that gives 100%. I'm very interested to see how this shakes out. It's really amazing, as I stated at the start of today's show, how much things have changed at One Bills Drive, the perception of the organization. People said that Terry was in over his head. People said that some said that Doug Whaley should not have been fired, that they were starting over. It was too soon. Definitely wasn't me. I was calling for Doug Whaley's head. And now we have a GM that was, slated to be a GM eventually at some point soon with the Carolina Panthers that we took from Carolina. We have a defensive coordinator turned head coach that looks like he has real conviction as a head coach, whether it's an 0-0 record or not. Sean McDermott looks like he has really been waiting for this opportunity for many years, and I think he's really ready to be a head coach, as opposed to first-time head coaches of years past, like the Greg Williams of the world, like the Mike Mularkeys of the world, and like the Doug Marones of the world. Sean McDermott, I feel, really wants this opportunity with the Bills, really wants to relish this opportunity with the Bills, and to know that he has a sidekick that he has worked with in years past, and then that guy goes out and hires top flight executives for this team. This is a different Buffalo Bills now today than it was yesterday, and I'm willing to say that, willing to give them credit when it is due. I think 2017 might not be the year that the Bills make the playoffs, but I have a high hope that 2018 will be the year that the Bills make the playoffs. And no, I do not think it will be with Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback. I think Tyrod Taylor after 2017 will be let go or released, being that he might not have a positive 2017 season. I think this 2017 season will not go too well for the Bills just because it's a transition year. You're transitioning back to a 4-3, not so much that. You're transitioning into another offense, which is very different from the offenses that were run in previous years. They say, meaning the reporters and coaches around the NFL, they say that this offense will cater to Tyrod Taylor. I don't know if there's an offense that can cater to a quarterback that cannot throw the ball like the other 31 quarterbacks in the NFL can. There are real doubts about Tyrod Taylor's throwing ability at the NFL level, as a starting quarterback, I should say, and I think that they're warranted. Plus, the schedule is not kind to this team. Plus, they are still hurting from that trade that Doug Whaley made, in which the Bills did not have a 2015 first-round pick. Next year, they have 2 first-round picks. One will be theirs. The other one will be Kansas City's. So I'm really excited for the future just based on that alone. There's some decent quarterbacks in next year's draft class. Whether they go that direction or not, I think that they have a decent quarterback in tow in Nathan Peterman to kind of take over for Tyrod in 2018 if need be. And then the Bills could look to drafting other areas of need, offensive line, defense again, in the 2018 draft, or maybe adding another weapon for that offense or defense. Only time will tell, but for all intents and purposes, I think that this was a real changing of the culture of this team is what has been preached since the days of Doug Marrone. I feel like the Bills are actually doing it now, bringing in guys that are of the right mind. And to keep in mind, while things have been pretty stressful as a Bills fan, for myself and for you included, the listener, this is the first hire virtually that Terry has made since becoming the owner of the Bills. He is running the show. These are his moves, bringing in guys like Brandon Beane, bringing in guys like Sean McDermott. Really, that McDermott hire really set the wheels in motion for Brandon Beane, and then Brandon Beane brings in Brian Gaine and Joe Shane. I like those guys. I think that their credibility speaks for itself. Joe Shane worked in a role with Bill Parcells. Brian Gaine worked in a high transition time, a highly touted transitional period for the Houston Texans, and did it fairly well. So I'm very interested to see how his experience with that in Houston translates to the translation that Buffalo is making now, going from Doug Whaley and Rex Ryan to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. Very excited to see what he brings to the table in that regard. And then obviously Brandon Beane getting his shot as a GM and Sean McDermott getting his shot as a head coach. We know the identity of this team. It is not in their quarterback. It is in their run game. And Rick Dennison's offense, very similar to Gary Kubiak's of years past with Baltimore and Denver, being that he has virtually followed Gary Kubiak everywhere he has coached. Is very similar zone read running offense. So you've seen what the running backs have been able to do inside that offense. You're talking about Arian Foster. You're talking about Justin Forsett. Talking about C.J. Anderson. LaShawn McCoy is better in my eyes than quite possibly all three of those running backs put together. So I think the sky is the limit for McCoy this season in terms of his fantasy football value. I think LaShawn McCoy is a top 5 running back this year in the world of fantasy football. He's going to be heavily leaned on. The Bills' offensive line is better than it was last year with the addition of Deion Dawkins, the tackle from Temple, and this offense caters to LaShawn McCoy. Look at what is around LaShawn McCoy up front. Now, as opposed to last year, you had Jerome Felton, a solid run blocker, but nobody rated better in terms of run blocking, according to Pro Football Focus, like the former Falcon, now turned Buffalo Bill, Patrick DeMarco. I think a huge addition for the Buffalo Bills. A guy that I'm really interested to see how he pans out for Buffalo is Jordan Johnson, the running back from the University of Buffalo. Looking to make an impact on this team. I think he has some wiggle room to make this roster, being that Mike Gillislee is now gone. Jonathan Williams is really the only running back that I think will really challenge for that number 2 spot. I think Jordan Johnson could easily slot in at number 3 if he has a solid mini camp and a solid training camp, especially. Training camp is where the battle is won or lost, and Jordan Johnson will have to really step up. But a lot of exciting news for a Buffalo fan base, for the Buffalo Bills fan base. I'm going to talk about more exciting news in the wide world of Buffalo sports with the Buffalo Sabres and my reaction to the moves that the Buffalo Sabres have been making lately. So stay tuned, guys. Thank you for tuning in. That was part 1 of today's show of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It is May 15th, 2017. You got a beautiful day, beautiful night in Western New York. And stay tuned. We are going to go to commercial break. Part 2 of the show coming right up, talking about the Buffalo Sabres and the exciting news that they have brought to the table.